There's always been the semblance of two worlds coexisting, sometimes in harmony and sometimes threatening to consume the other. The dissonant cacophony of development beats against the harmonious rhythm of the wild. There should be no confusion as to which one has been dominating which. Mankind has spread across the globe like a flood, fundamentally changing the landscape as it goes. A torrent of right angles and exact measurements, leveling mountains, damming rivers, and erasing forests. We build apartment complexes and destroy bobcat dens. Today, there are few places where wildlife can move around without the threat of encroaching development. We push our edge into their habitat. Doug Brown, land steward at the Upper Valley Land Trust, says this while pushing his coffee aside to make room for a large folder of maps and documents, as we sit at the bar of Lou's Diner. Bears wander through suburban cul-de-sacs in search of food. Coyotes are shot as a nuisance where they once roamed. Deer freeze in headlights. Acquired by UVLT in 2014 and 2017, the Ricks Ledges Conservation Area is made up of 3 parcels: Ricks East, Chiron, Altaria. Together, Ricks Ledges totals 358.5 acres of wetlands, talus slopes, rocky ridges, and swampy peatlands. The conserved land is a sanctuary where car horns and the penetrating sounds of construction become distant for both people and wildlife. Instead, within the borders of Ricks Ledges, you can hear twigs snap and leaves crunch underfoot, and feel the breath of the wind brush your cheek high up on the ridge. Ricks Ledges is a haven for bears, bobcats, coyotes, and moose. Encircled by roads, encroached upon by office buildings, and gouged by parking lots, it is a surviving pocket of wilderness. There's something that resembles a trail, a small break in the trees that had once been cleared. I follow the trail as it winds its way up the hill, its switchbacks like the curves of a snake, and find myself at its crest, overlooking a drop-off. Beneath the birch canopy, the leaves filter the light a soft amber tone, broken only by the vivid hues of the red maples. The goal of the Upper Valley Land Trust is to preserve Ricks Ledges as important habitat for wildlife and for the protection of wetlands and water resources. Its benefits for people are secondary to the ecological. Ricks Ledges is something of an anomaly in New England, a mostly unfragmented forest that plays a key role in maintaining 2 major wildlife corridors. The conserved land connects 1,500 acres of core interior unfragmented forest, from the more developed area closest to Lebanon to the larger northern forests. Entering the protected area feels like a sojourn from the world of development. You are neither a guest nor an owner. The moose and deer that watch us from just out of sight, and the birds that call high up in the canopy, have just as much right to be there, to exist, as you do. Today, I am a visitor. Like much of the Upper Valley, Ricks Ledges was utilized for a mixture of agriculture and forestry. Whether it was the Abenaki or the European settlers, people have left their mark on the forests of New England. In many ways, New England forests have been changed for the foreseeable future. Forlorn stumps are decaying reminders of the mammoth white pines that once stood in defiance of the British crown, sentinels of the woodlands before axes and saws chipped away at their dignity until only swiftly hewn ship masts remained. Little old-growth forest remains, and that which still exists only lasts in small stands that take less than a minute to walk through. Ricks Ledges is a snapshot of what is happening everywhere, Doug Brown tells me when I ask him why it's important to conserve the area. Ricks Ledges is not just a glimpse into what is currently happening, but a link to historical disturbances. Knowing what happened and what is happening in Ricks Ledges and places like it can be extrapolated to a much larger context. Much of the forest that makes up Ricks Ledges is a mixture of hemlock and hardwood, which has been affected by logging in the recent past. The Upper Valley Land Trust aims to manage the forest in a manner that fosters the highest quality wildlife habitat. UVLT has no plans for commercial timber production, and the cutting of any trees is meant as a management tool to create small gaps in the forest which would mimic the natural disturbance regimes. Climbing down from the boulder, I step across a small opening made where the boulder abuts a smaller rock. Strewn with leaves, but revealing the slight traces of inhabitation, the little alcove must be a den of some forest dweller. Probably a bobcat, I think out loud, offering my words to the forest as if it would answer me. Bobcats are mysterious and solitary animals. They often live in small caves like the one formed by the two boulders, and have been known to have several dens throughout their territory. While female bobcat territories are normally only about 5 square miles, a male's territory can be up to 30 square miles. Rick's Ledges has a significant bobcat population, even though it only covers a little over half a square mile. I think about the pet daycare that I passed on my bike to get here. We build buildings to host the animals we prefer, while the ones we never think about are left with a dwindling fraction of their optimal range. Constant pressure as their edge is pushed inward. This is what makes the fragmentation of wildlife habitat brought about in increased development such a problem. It is also what makes conserved land like Rick's Ledges so important. A natural resources inventory of Rick's Ledges in 2009 documented 2 primary wildlife corridors north to south through the heart of the protected area. These corridors, known as hotspots, contain many overlapping resources that are integral to the support of wildlife communities. Evidence of moose, black bear, deer, bobcat, and turkey have been found in these corridors, and well-used animal trails elsewhere in the area make it seem likely that the entire property serves as a refuge for wildlife in Lebanon. Rick's Ledges is home to a diverse set of forest-dwelling wildlife. Its large numbers of mature beech and oak trees make it a valuable bear habitat, and its stands of hemlock mixed with balsam fir and red spruce provide the perfect wintering for deer. While small compared to the optimal range of most wildlife, Rick's Ledges offers a necessary interior that is largely unfragmented, providing necessary foraging opportunities. Human-wildlife interaction is an interesting facet to our coexistence. It's where our edges meet. I continue on the trail, away from the boulder field. The ridge is exposed granite with only a dusting of soil, barely enough for the fallen leaves to cling to. My footsteps on the flat granite echo in the stillness, the heartbeat of the forest. I stop to watch the wind toss around some ruby-colored maple leaves. Far off to the right side of the ridge, down below, I see the tawny figure of a deer. It must be young, all knobby legs and round ears that look too big for its head. I watch the deer for a minute more before carrying on up the ridge. The deer, unfrozen, moves on too. A splash of red splatters across my boot, a blood-red maple leaf. The largest effect on deer populations is humans, Doug said to me contemplatively. The wind sweeps the maple leaf from my boot and sends it cartwheeling over the edge of the ridgeline. I watch it tumble on wave after wave of forest air. When it finally comes to a stop, halted by the dried branches of a fallen birch, I step off the ridgeline and I follow it. Just as it reaches a crescendo, the forest symphony is interrupted by blaring car horns and squealing tires. In minutes, the audible roar of Route 120 almost knocks me off my feet. The suddenness with which you can be completely alone and then standing on the edge of a highway is startling. The highway must have felt like the advent of the apocalypse for the deer, bobcat, and bear that would have been naturally inclined to cross this way even after the construction was complete. Rick's Ledges is a much-needed link between the nearby unfragmented landmark and New Boston areas of the larger, less developed northern forests. In the distance, I know that to my left the highway thunders along in constant motion, and to my right office cubicles have supplanted bobcat dens and bird nests. The land that borders a conserved forest seemed to press in on it. We have encircled the forest in a wall of asphalt and brick, used dynamite and diesel to blast away its midriff. Doug is right. We can learn a lot about what is happening to wilderness by looking at Rick's Ledges. In its most simple form, the dynamic between the edge of development of the upper valley and protected areas like Rick's Ledges is no different than that of development elsewhere on the planet. But until we better understand our coexistence with nature, we risk everything within the parameters of the land we choose to protect. Everything beyond them, too.